Hey y'all, Melissa here with you today, and today I'm going to be showing you how to sew up a sweatshirt. It's been cold lately and all I've wanted to wear are sweatshirts. So this is a very basic one. It is sewn from my conroe sweatshirt pattern, and I'm doing a neckband, cuffs, and a hemband in bamboo fleece. I'm sewing this entirely on a regular sewing machine. You do not need a serger to sew this. And then the pattern that I'm using is available in my shop and I've got it linked below. So grab that, cut out your pieces, and I will meet you back at the sewing machine to show you how to put this together. Let's go over the pattern pieces I've cut out. I have a front, and this was cut on the fold. Same thing with the back, and then I have two sleeves also cut on the fold. And then I have the hemband, the sleeve cuffs, and the neckband. And you'll notice the neckband is a very slightly different shade here, and that's partly because I ran out of the original fabric to be able to cut it, but also because this is a rib knit and I prefer that for neckbands. So the first step here is going to be to take the back and the front, and I'm going to place them right sides together and stitch across at the shoulders. I am using a stretch stitch. This is the one that looks like a lightning bolt on my machine, and the 1/2 inch seam allowances as specified by the pattern. The next step is going to be to attach the sleeves. So I want to take each sleeve and I'm going to align the center of the sleeve with the seam allowance on my shirt. You can go ahead and open those seams up and pin if you'd like. Then I'll match up the outer edges and pin in between. Once you have sewn the sleeves on both sides, this is what your shirt will look like. So you see I've got a sleeve here and a sleeve here, and there's the neck hole. And then you want to fold the whole thing right sides together, and I'm going to match up these underarm seams. And I'm going to go ahead and open those up too and pin. And I'll match up the sleeve seam and continue down the side seam. So this will be sewn in one very long seam from the edge of the sleeve all the way down to the bottom of the side. And I will repeat that on the other side as well. Once you have stitched both of those side seams, then it's time to turn this right side out. And now it's time to go ahead and finish the edges. We're going to put the neckband on the neck, we're going to put the cuffs on the sleeves, and we're going to put the hemband on the bottom. And each of these is going to be sewn in a pretty similar manner. So the first step that I need to do with all 4 pieces is I need to fold them in half and sew down the side. So I'm just going to chain stitch all 4 of these at the machine. Once once you chain stitch all of those, you snip them apart. And then we're going to fold all of these wrong sides together. So I'm going to open up my collar seam there and I'm going to fold this whole neckband wrong sides together. And you can add pins to help keep it from unfolding. And then with the neckband, I actually like to make sure my pins are at quarter points once I have it kind of where it's staying together. So I'm going to move this front pin so that it's directly in the middle. I'm going to fold that to my center back seam and move the side pins as well. And I do the same thing with the cuffs and with the hemband. You want to turn them wrong sides together. So here's one cuff. And there's the next. And finally, the same thing with the hemband. And I want to quarter it like I did with the neckband. Let's start with this hemband because that'll be the easiest piece to put on. I want to match the two side seams to each other on my shirt so that I can mark the center front and the center back. And then I'm just going to match up the same points on my hemband. So I'm putting the seam of the hemband at center back. You can also put the seam at the side if you prefer. Either side. Once I have that pinned, it's going to look like this. And I'm going to take this to the machine, and what I'll need to do is stretch the hemband slightly to match up with the sweatshirt. So I'll do that as I'm sewing, and I'll just stretch until they're flat against each other. I like to start at center back, and I am still using my stretch stitch, lightning bolt. And then when I get to each set of pins or each pin, I just place my hand back at the next pin and then gently stretch until they're all flat, laying flat together. And then once I have it stretched, if I need to move a hand up to hold the stretch in that place, I can. So here is what that finished hemband looks like on the outside. Here it is on the inside. And if you'd like, on the inside, you can press all these seam allowances up and then gently stretch a little bit as you top stitch those down. Use a lightning bolt stitch again, or a very narrow and short zigzag stitch, and that will keep these from folding out if that bothers you. We're going to do the same thing for the cuff. I'm going to take the cuff and I'm going to turn it this way, and I'm going to place it around the sleeve. And I want to match the sleeve seam with the cuff seam. And this can get tricky because you're working in such a small area here, but let me show you what I like to do with cuffs. So when I put it on the machine, I like to put my presser foot inside the cuff. And once the needle is in it, then it's much easier to stretch the cuff because the needle helps hold it down. So I'm stretching the cuff and getting those edges lined up. And here is my finished cuff on that side. So I'll just need to repeat that on the other side. I've got both cuffs done, so let's talk about the neckline. Just like with these other things, I'm going to start by marking center front and center back of the neckline. Now something you'll notice here is that the front neckline is slightly longer than the back neckline. So depending on your neckband and the difference in length, you may want to actually cheat your side pins forward a little bit of the shoulder seam so that you've got a little more length on your neckband in the front and a little less in the back. This is going to be sewn very similar to how I sewed the hemband in terms of I'm only going to pin it in 4 places because I will need to stretch the neckband flat in between. And I am cheating the neckband forward about the width of the seam allowance to allow for the fact that the front neckline is a little bit longer than the back. Also pinning my shoulder seams open. And then one thing I do like to do different with neckbands, because I just like to double check and make sure, is instead of going straight to my stretch stitch, I'm going to start with a basting stitch. So I've got it lined up with a basting stitch here, and I'm going to baste this neckband in place. Once I've basted my neckband in place, I turn it to the inside, and I'm checking for length here and for width. So the first thing I want to make sure is that I've kept my neckband a consistent width all around the neckline. The other thing I want to check for is to make sure that the neckband is laying smoothly in this area. Sometimes if the neckband is too long, you'll see kind of more of a right angle between the neckband and the shoulder. And I want to check that it is laying smoothly along the front curve, because again, if a neckband is too long, then what you'll have is you'll see like bubbling up in the front neckline especially. And if either of those things is going on, which they don't really seem to be on this, then the neckband is too long. And what I would do is pull out my basting stitches, and I would shorten the neckband by sewing a deeper seam allowance on the center back neckband. And then I would go ahead and attach it again, basting and checking. If you see instead that there's a whole lot of puckering along the shirt, not the neckband, but the shirt, then what's going on there is your neckband is too short, and you actually may need to cut another one. And the reason I always baste when I check these is because every single fabric can act a little bit differently. So I think it's always a good idea to kind of baste my neckband in just to double check. It does take a teeny bit longer, but I never regret doing it, and I do sometimes regret skipping that step. So I recommend it. Once you've determined that your neckband is correct, and you might also want to steam iron it before you make that final determination, because that'll help shrink the rib knit if it's stretched out, and it can smooth out a lot of bumps. But if those bumps or puckers reappear after steaming it, then you definitely know you have a length issue. So after you've done that, then you just go right back along the same line, and you use a stretch stitch instead to go ahead and finish this neckband. You don't want to leave it with just basting stitches. Those will pull out and you'll end up with holes. And then just like the hemband, you can actually go and top stitch this in place to keep the seam allowances from the neckband from rolling up on you. So once you have restitched that neckline, then this is your sweatshirt. You've got the neckband, you've got the cuffs, and you've got a hemband. And if you check out this playlist, I also have a whole bunch of other hacks that are done to the same pattern. It's very versatile, and there are lots of looks you can create from the same thing.